Welcome everyone to our show today. I'm Janice Thompson and this is the Janice Thompson Show. I'm the producer and host of today's wonderful, exciting topic, Schenectady Schools, It Takes a Village. We have a panel here from the school administration and other leaders, and I want to introduce them to you right now. I have to my left Larry Spring, who is Superintendent of Schools, and next to him is Patty Pacer, Assistant Superintendent, and next to her is Lee Kleinkloss, and she is the Family Engagement Facilitator with Lincoln School. Lincoln is an elementary school. And next to her is my friend and colleague, Shirley Radine, who is president of SICM and also has her own show here with SAC. And we're so proud to have her. And next to her is Lon Penna, a Niskuna Rotarian who is the main organizer of today's event. Thank you. I wanted to do a couple of quotes before we start, and the first one is from Abraham Lincoln. Education is the most important subject which we as a people may be engaged in. So raising the next generation is a shared responsibility in this effort. When families, communities, and schools work together, students are more successful and the entire community benefits. This quote is by Karen Mapp, and she is a senior lecturer at Harvard. So I have the privilege of introducing our first guest who will be speaking, Larry Spring, and who I have the pleasure of meeting recently. He was guest speaker at our SAC membership meeting recently. And he has a great mission, and I'd like you to start with that. Larry, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Thanks for having me here. As you said, my mission is to ensure that race, economics, and disability no longer serve as predictors of academic achievement. I believe that no matter what zip code a student lives in, no matter their race, no matter their economic background, no matter whether or not they have a disability, it's our job to ensure that all children get what they need from school in order to be able to get that equal playing field, in order to be able to get that equal shot at being successful in life. And unfortunately, right now, those three things are very significant predictors for student success. Race, economics, and disability, each of them on their own and certainly together are very powerful predictors in telling us which students will drop out of school, which students will perform very poorly, which students are likely to be suspended from school, which students are likely to end up involved in the juvenile justice system. And so we have certainly an awful lot of work that we need to do to try to create equity for our children. And certainly we think about that as a precursor to creating equity in our greater society. We have our work cut out for us with that. There are things that we need to do differently within the school system, and things that we very much need the state to do differently for schools. New York State right now has the most segregated school system in the United States. It's by race, it is the most segregated school system of all 50 states.
Really?
Yeah, and that's and sometimes that's a little bit shocking for folks, and to think that that's not a state in a different region of the country. That's the most segregated. New York State historically has been pretty supportive of desegregation efforts, especially in the wake of Brown versus Board of Education, or in the 61st anniversary of that decision. And despite New York's democratic leanings and support of those desegregation efforts. We are the most segregated school system in the country. And then the reality is, in the way in which the state legislature and the governor fund education in this state, those small number of school districts that serve predominantly minority children, there are only 55 of them, those school districts are far more likely, 10 times more likely, to receive less than 70% of the funding that the education law demands that those school districts receive. So the higher the percentage of white students there are in a district, the more likely it is that they'll get 100% of their funding. The higher percentage of minority students there are in a district becomes much more likely, in fact, 10 times more likely if it's majority minority in the district, 10 times more likely that they'll get less than 70% of their funding. And so for a school district like Schenectady, we get 55% of our funding annually, which means that New York State shorts the Schenectady City School District $62 million
And you've been
every year.
working diligently to reverse that.
We have.
Yes.
We've been working very hard at that. We've been, constantly bringing this to the attention of legislators. I think that it's something that, is very difficult to believe. When we talk about those kind of numbers from, New York State being the most segregated school system to a school district being shorted $62 million, to many folks it seems like hyperbole. It's difficult to believe, and then when you really begin to unpack the numbers for them, finally, people begin to gain some sense of realism that there's something very, very wrong going on, and maybe something needs to happen. One of the things that we did as a school district is we filed a civil rights complaint against New York State with the Office of Civil Rights in Washington, D.C., and the first time in the history of that office, they decided to open up that complaint and start an investigation against New York State based on this complaint. And so it's the first time that an institution, a state institution, that would be Schenectady City School District, filed a complaint against the state, and the Office of Civil Rights decided that there was enough merit to the complaint to open up that investigation, and that's ongoing right now. And so we certainly hope that the federal government will step in and force New York State to abide by its own funding formula and begin to apply it with equity to all school districts.
And a lot of this has been covered in our Daily Gazette.
It's been
it's been front page news for a while.
Yeah, locally it's been front page news. In lots of things. It's actually made the national news a little bit because it's the first time that they've ever opened up such an investigation. So, it was in the Wall Street Journal, it was covered out on the West Coast, in USA Today. Unfortunately, the response politically has been, that's politics. That's the way democracy works. I'm sorry that you're not getting as much money as you want, but, so be it. The problem is that we want so badly for all districts to do well, but the reality is when you take a look at which districts are doing well and which districts aren't, you can see very clearly the districts that are spending more money per pupil are doing better. And kids who live in profound poverty, kids who come to school with the difficulties that are associated with living in urban environments, need additional services, not fewer. And Schenectady right now is spending less per pupil than all but 13 school districts in New York State. And there are close to 700 districts in New York State. So we're running very, very lean. We are an extremely efficient operation, and we're not spending anywhere as close to the amount per pupil that we should be spending because there's $62 million every year that we're not getting in revenue from New York State that the law says we should be getting.
Wow, it's taking longer to resolve this than you planned, I'm sure.
Well, I don't know that I ever thought it would be very, very quick to resolve. Beginning to take on what I think is a very weighty issue. With legislators, the governor, and the state education department and the federal government. I think from the beginning, we said this is going to be a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint. Solving the funding issue is going to mean that we're going to have some resolve. We're going to have persistence. We are going to have to slog through it and continue the battle. But in the meantime, we can't just hold our breath and wait for additional funding. Our kids need things from us now. And in place of that additional funding for us to be able to purchase those additional services, there are things that we need to do, ways in which we need to rely on the community and perhaps some non-traditional partners to help us make things happen for kids right now, because they can't wait for that marathon to end. They can't wait.
Sure.
They only get 1 year in third grade. We've got to make sure that that's the best year in third grade that it can be.
So besides the funding problem, there's some other issues like transiency.
Sure. So lots of the things that go along with urban districts and intense poverty. Kids tend to move in and out of the school district, right? So when we think about kids moving through a school district, kindergarten through 12th grade, oftentimes we think about those kids all experiencing that same system as they move through. And when you're looking at kids who are graduating, that's a good assessment of what that system looked like. But in reality, only about 5% of our kids experience that system. Right? They enter our system in kindergarten and they leave in 12th grade and they experienced all of those grade levels within the school system. So 95% of our kids are coming to us at some other point in time, during their school career, and about 20% or 18% of our kids are moving out every single year, and a different 18% are moving in. And that's a very different kind of school system when we're thinking about.
Right, and it compounds issues, certainly.
Right, because every time a child moves, their learning goes on pause for somewhere between 3 and 4 months.
Sure.
Especially when you think about some of the reasons why families are moving in the middle of the school year and things like this. Sometimes, families are getting new jobs and they've got to move, and it can be a positive experience. Lots of times, though, it's because there's been an eviction or foreclosure, or they're escaping a sense of violence or something like that. And so, we get kids who are moving into Schenectady for reasons that they might not necessarily understand as a child, and it might feel traumatic to them. And
Sure.
And there are mental health things that we need to take care of with that child first, so that they can then begin to be ready to learn.
Sure. So there's mental health issues, physical health issues as well that are challenging, certainly.
There are. We've got kids, certainly lots of kids who don't see doctors enough and dentists enough. We have dental programs embedded right into the schools to try to make sure kids are getting some regular cleanings, and we're able to do some triage of some of those things. We're trying to put medical clinics right into our schools so that we're able to take care of some of the routine medical problems right in the school and make those things easier or more convenient for families to take care of. Mental health issues are one of the most difficult things to address, though, because not only are they more difficult to diagnose and bring to the surface than medical issues, but there's also a stigma associated with that in our society.
It's less, but it's still there. I worked in mental health, and it's improved some, but it's
getting
still
better.
there.
Yeah, it is getting better. But there's still this notion that mental health is something else. We don't think about seeing a therapist in the same way that we think about seeing a doctor. We don't think about
Exactly.
Our wellness in that way. And when we think about the experiences that kids have when they're living in intense poverty, the trauma that they're exposed to, these things that we call adverse childhood experiences, kids before the age of 5 who are witnessing violence, who are exposed to environmental violence, or seeing someone being beaten up, or a lot of what goes on in what they call neighborhood disorganization that's affiliated with intense poverty. These kids bring with them trauma, and oftentimes, quite often, to the degree that they're actually diagnosable with post-traumatic stress disorder, which we tend to think of as being associated with soldiers coming home from war.
Yeah.
And when you think about what it takes for a 5-year-old child or an 8-year-old child to develop post-traumatic stress disorder, it's disheartening. It's worrisome and troublesome, and it requires some significant intervention in order to help that child feel safe again and begin to treat that disorder to help them begin to progress more normally emotionally in their life.
Well, it's nice to know that there are staff to recognize some of these things
So yeah,
and get and intervene
Yep, we do
at
have
the earliest time possible, right?
We certainly try. We do have a number of social workers on staff. Since I've come on board in the district, we have worked really hard to increase our staffing in the realms that provide for students' mental health needs. We've increased our school psychologists, we've increased our social workers. We know that our kids need that support, but we also know that we're not anywhere close to staffed well enough to provide the needs, to provide for the needs of all of those kids. We know that there are kids who have needs that are flying under our radar, and there are kids that we know have needs that we're just not able to get to and get service to those kids yet.
And dyslexia is a problem, and we have a good program here in New York State, I understand, to help identify that early.
But yeah, so there are certainly a number of learning disabilities, a number of learning difficulties that kids have, and and I think we're probably much better at identifying those learning difficulties and figuring out what are the specific reading problems that kids have. Again, those mental health problems can be a little bit more evasive, but we do have a pretty good handle on what are those difficulties that kids have with learning to read, how their reading skills break down, and again working to try to create as robust a platform of services as we can to address those difficulties for kids and as early as possible.
Sure.
When those skills are just developing.
And then of course there's the crime issue and violence, and maybe it's occurring in the home, and that's an issue too.
So there's
difficult.
So there are a number of kids who live with that, who see that witness that. We've got a percentage of students who have one or both parents who are incarcerated. Maybe it's their grandparents that are raising them. And we know that anytime a parent is incarcerated, that's very traumatic to a child, and that requires additional service and attention to help that child deal with that, help them understand it. And that's an ongoing issue for them in which they're going to need assistance so that they can continue to learn.
Do you have a statistic on the prevalence of that in our school system, in the families? What you think might be
not
an issue?
Yeah, not across the entire district. We have some anecdotal evidence. There are some places in the district where, within a classroom, we know what's going on, and so I don't know that I could say that it generalizes across the entire district. But certainly in one classroom, we did that kind of look, and we found that more than a fifth of the students in that classroom had a parent that was incarcerated.
That's a large number.
It is.
It really is, and it's probably similar across the country.
I don't know. That's
know.
that's a difficult.
That's a large number, regardless.
It is.
I wanted to move on to talking about poverty, which is a really huge issue. Not just here in Schenectady, but in our state and in the United States and globally, of course. I wanted to get your thoughts on it, and I wanted to talk to Patty Pacer and also Shirley Redine, who have some great input in that arena. So I'll start with you.
Sure. So, Schenectady is suffers with some significant poverty. We have the 13th highest concentration of childhood poverty, in the country, and I think sometimes people, don't fully grasp what that means. And so some of the things that go along with poverty are, what they call neighborhood disorganization. Kids tend to be exposed to more environmental violence. They tend to, have less exposure to written word, less exposure to written language. They end up with some different kinds of experiences in terms of how they're encouraged or rewarded in their efforts and kind of pro-school behaviors. And so they end up with some difficulties around what they call their executive function skills. Their ability to think ahead, their ability to plan ahead, their ability to predict, weigh consequences of their actions, and these kinds of things. And the kind of insidious thing about this is that kids who grow up in poverty end up with these stressors that result in these mental health issues. And people with mental health issues that go untreated earn far, far less than people who have those issues treated.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get this vicious cycle where poverty is feeding mental health, and mental health is creating more poverty. And it's this fairly intense cycle that exists. And because mental health is a very difficult thing to get at, to break that stigma and help people get that service, it has this tremendous economic impact. It can be very debilitating for families, for neighborhoods and for communities, and that's part of what we're wrestling with now.
We have some programs in place, though, that are helping navigate the poverty problem. And Patty, I know you had some information that you wanted to share today, so,
Right. So
I would like you to do that.
Yeah, so to build on what Larry was talking about, we had talked a little bit about our breakfast and lunch program for all of our students, and I'm sure that Larry could give you a little bit more details on that as well. And also our weekend backpack program, where we've partnered with other outside agencies. And I think Shirley could probably build a little bit on our community involvement with some of our programs that we're providing for our kids, especially in the summer.
Okay.
Yes, we have a summer lunch program. The school district has arranged for students to have lunch during the school year. The thought then comes, what do they do during the summer? And yet that nutrition level really has to be kept up, or you've lost everything that you've provided through the school year. And so Schenectady Inner City Ministries, SICM, has a program where they provide lunch for every child. You do not have to have any specific criteria. You just show up and they get lunch every day. This year we've expanded the program, and we have 2 vans that were provided through they're through some foundation money and through some government money. And these vans have refrigeration ability, and so we've expanded the whole summer lunch program because of the vans. And I just found out that we serve on an average of 7,000 kids a day.
That is just amazing,
And that's-
and it increased from last year.
That's
right,
a
Shirley?
large
Big
increase, a large increase. And so it's kind of, to me, we're doing something really good, but it's sad that we have to do that something really good.
Exactly. Now, where's all the money coming from?
Well, we get federal through the state. It's federal money that's filtered through the state. We also have volunteers who work in the program. We do hire some summer staff to work with the program. And then SICM itself is a composite of Schenectady churches. And so they support as much as possible through those churches. We have something like 57 churches that are members of SICM. And so it's back to that. It takes a village, and and I sometimes say it takes a community. The community is the village.
Yes.
And so each part of that community really has to meet the accountability to make sure children are taken care of.
And to elaborate on the origination of "It Takes a Village,"
well,
you wanted to make a comment
it's
on
interesting because that is an African saying, which if you traveled in Africa, you would really understand that. I visited several countries in Africa, and you get that sense of they've got it. They know that it takes a village to take care of each other.
Sure.
And it's a whole different concept of what that means in the African nations as opposed to here. We're just beginning to learn it.
Yes.
And we're sort of being forced into learning it. So, yeah. But we also have a food pantry, which people can go and this whole the fact that we talk about poverty, and it's not an isolated situation. It is connected with the school district. It's connected with how children feel about themselves. If you are considered to be in poverty, you're looked down upon many times, and that from an early age can give a child a sense of no esteem. I don't really belong in this, whatever this is that I was born in. I don't belong here. And so I think it's very important that we focus on these poverty issues and work as hard as we can to empower kids to be able to be who they can be. And also we're beginning to look at SICM a program where we're going to help parents to learn how to be advocates. And it crossed my mind when you were talking about the state and the lawsuit and all of that. I think it's very important that parents get much more involved in advocating for this equalization of funding. And so we are beginning, we haven't set it up yet, but we're beginning to look at providing programs where we can help teach parents how to be advocates. And I think that's just so important.
And we're going to be talking after on parental involvement.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's so crucial.
Yes.
And Patty, you were going to mention when we had talked earlier about the children that qualify for free lunch or reduced, and that not to show discrimination, everyone gets the lunch or the breakfast. Is that correct?
Right.
Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Right. So I would actually defer a little bit to Larry because he was actually the leader who pursued the grant that started this. So I think that's an important piece to mention.
So there are a couple of pieces to this, and part of that is taking advantage of the federal government's community eligibility provision, which allows us to give free meals to every child. We still have to verify income. We still have to track, which kids are taking lunch and all of those things. But it allows us to give free breakfast and free lunch to every child in the district every day. And then we pursued a grant that allowed us to get a breakfast in the classroom program up and running, because it's one thing to provide free lunch to every child, because most of the buildings have 3 or 4 lunches that run through the cafeteria.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fit all of the kids in the cafeteria at one time, and some kids eat lunch early and some kids eat lunch later. But breakfast, everybody's eating at the same time, and trying to get all the kids in the cafeteria at once to eat breakfast is very difficult. And so we had a very low participation rate for our free breakfast program, and so we turned it into a universal breakfast program, so that in the elementary school, every kid is getting breakfast in their classrooms every day. It's actually
so they don't go to the cafeteria.
No. And that's actually the way in which we take attendance.
Oh, okay.
So how many breakfasts are
idea.
taken is how many kids are there that day.
Great idea. It's a great incentive to get them to come to school too, isn't it?
And it actually is interesting. We had been fighting an attendance issue for many years in the district. We had done some things like we hired attendance deans to go out and knock on doors and drag kids out of bed. We changed our policy. We started working with probation. How can we get attendance increased? When we created the universal free breakfast program, the percentage of kids who were attending at least 90% of the time skyrocketed. Feeding kids is what got so many of them to school. It really makes so much sense, right? So not these policy things, not hitting them with sticks and getting somebody out there to bang on their door, but offering them a nice breakfast to start their day. Got them coming to school.
Now, when you say universal, it's all over the United States?
Well, no, universal it's in every school in our district.
Oh, okay, so universal in the district.
Yep. So
I just want to clarify that.
Yep. So in the elementary school, every classroom they're having breakfast to start the day off. At the middle and high school, kids can go to the cafeteria to get breakfast, or we have what look like big vending machines, these kiosks where the kids can punch in their own personal information, and then they can select which breakfasts they want.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
And it dispenses them a
Can
milk
people
and
from
some
the
cereal.
public come in and join in?
They can't.
Oh
So
dear.
every child has their own their own code, and they're linked into our system, and that's
great.
what.
I applaud you on
exciting.
that. That's great. You innovated that.
It's been a great model for us, and what's nice is that there are lots of other school districts now that have looked at what we've done with that and how we've done that, and they're using that as a model. Other parts of the state and other parts of the country to begin to address this notion. It's 82% of the students in the school district qualify for free or reduced lunch. That's a little over 8,000 kids, but we think we've got about 2,000 kids that actually live with food insecurity on a daily basis. And so it's not just we want to make sure they've got breakfast and they've got lunch every day, but we also send home backpacks full of food with about 750 kids every Friday.
Yes. I
and
heard
the-
about that.
And the way in which
you told
we
me about that, Patty.
Yes.
the way in which we identified that is, by watching kids' behavior in the cafeteria. We have a behavioral screening tool, and so when kids engage in some behavior that might otherwise result in discipline, we're using that as information. And a student who's snatching food off of another child's plate, a student who's coming up at the end of lunch to ask for any food that might be thrown away, students who are hoarding food, all of this we've got folks trained to watch and record that information. So those are indicators that a child is hungry, that they're anxious about where their food is going to come from.
They might be bringing it home because for the other family members too.
Exactly.
That's another issue. And without good food, the bodies and the brain can't develop, and they can't learn.
Yep.
So good food.
So the
so
food,
important.
So the food provides that energy, but not having that food or being worried about that food, that anxiety, feeds these mental health issues. Kids who live with that daily anxiety end up developing major mood disorders. They end up becoming depressed. They end up becoming very anxious, and that begins to exhibit itself outwardly in behaviors, in acting out, in aggression, those kinds of things.
Sure. Well, that's understandable. I want to go to Lon Penna over here across from me, who is the main organizer of today's event. He's an Iskuna Rotarian, and he's done great things with his organization with Lincoln Elementary School here in Schenectady to help make things better there, because it's a struggling school. It's not the only one, but for today's purpose, we want to focus on Lincoln School. And so I'd like you to go forward with the things you want to talk about, and we'll be showing the audience a picture of your fine group, which is small, but you helped get that group back on the map, didn't you?
Yes, and thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that. And I'd like to start by saying how much I admire the other people on this panel. Larry, Schenectady is so fortunate to have you as our superintendent. And I'm really looking forward to the changes that Schenectady is going to see going forward. Each and every child that we save, and the changes, Schenectady right now in crime, that is red, and I think that's going to change. And I think it has a lot to do with you being here, and with Patty, your assistant, and with what you're doing with SICM and with the churches pulling together. It's an honor. It's quite an honor.
Yeah,
And
so let's talk about the mission with the Rotary. What is the mission?
So the first thing I wanted to say was we did end up volunteering in Lincoln. And what we found was a great school. We found a great school. We were working with a phenomenal teacher, Simona Masterson, was a phenomenal teacher, dedicated, money out of her own pocket, going the extra mile, writing grants to be able to take the kids on field trips, putting together, and I watched her teach, phenomenal teacher, and she's just one of many there. The principal that was there, unfortunately we're losing him because he had family commitments elsewhere. He himself had parents who were incarcerated and got his doctorate, and now he's a leader in education. What a great principal we had there. And Jennifer Cliff, the reading teacher, she on her own, this is not job description, she on her own arranged for donations of books so that every child could take home 8 books over the summer. She had them all organized, picked one from the science category, one from the chapter books, one from the, and she had all, so I was there to witness this wonderful program that she was doing. And then Lee working with the families. Any family that has a problem, Lee is prepared to hook them up with this right welfare organization that can help. And the English teachers, there were 3 kids in the class who were just learning English, one who was deaf, and I think maybe the school determined she didn't hear well, but I don't know where we're going to get her hearing aids, but we got to get that taken care of too. So we've got 3 kids that don't speak English very well. And the school had the resource, an English as a second language teacher that would come in and take 3 of the kids out of the classroom to work with them. So these are all wonderful programs that the school was providing. It was a great school. I might say, by the way, sometimes the teacher cheated, and she didn't take the 3 kids out because that was when Rotary was there, and she didn't want her kids to miss out on what Rotary was doing. One of the Rotarians that would come with me often, Don Palmer, was formerly with the museum on the board, so he would bring in all kinds of science projects and activities and kids for things to do. When we walked in the door, they'd say, "What are we going to do today?" And the English as a second language teacher didn't want to deprive her kids from that, so sometimes she would let them stay for our program.
And Don Palmer is in our audience today.
Yes.
And Don Palmer has a reading group, and
Well, we have a
about
photograph,
that.
and I can put that up
That-
on the screen,
that
showing Don.
That will be up. Yes.
Yes. And it shows him with a Dr. Seuss hat on.
Yeah.
And it was Dr. Seuss's birthday, but he's got to pick which book, and he picked the one that said, "Oh, the places will go."
Yes,
That
that's
was
a
what
great one.
what he read.
That's a great one. And then we wanted to talk about the dictionary project,
Yes,
please.
so now I'm going to tell our story. First of all, Niskayuna Rotary is a very small club, 8 members. Most Rotary clubs are 20 to 100 members. We're very small. But we can still use the tools that Rotary gives us, and one of them that's very common for Rotarians to do is to bring dictionaries to the school. We're Niskayuna Rotary, and we say, well, look at our kids have such a very low dropout rate, very high going to college rate. Why don't we bring the dictionaries to the Schenectady school? So we adopted Yeats, Martin Luther King, and Lincoln, and we bring the dictionaries. And that really would have been the end of it. But when we did it this past year, I ran out of dictionaries. So I had to come back to Lincoln School. So now while I'm talking to Mrs. Masterson and handing out the remaining dictionaries, I said, is there anything else Rotary can do? She said, well, our pencil sharpener's broken. Okay, so we went and got our pencil sharpener, we brought it in. And then, is there anything else we can do? And I happen to know that we could get through computer rehab here, the Elephant Society that works at the GE facility, that we can get computers for $9. Would you like more computers? And she said, that's a good idea. She said, if I could get computers for half of my class, then we could use computer learning for half my class while I'm working with the others. And her class was a split 3rd, 4th grade class, so they had varying degrees of proficiency. So this would have helped her out. So we brought in the laptops, and I asked my grandkids what would be a good software for these kids to use, and they recommended Sundog. My kids were visiting us a week or so ago on vacation, and they're playing Sundog. So here they're doing Common Core math examples for fun, and they're competing with each other. They're sitting right next to one another, and they would play each other, and if they got the math question right, their race car went faster. And the 8-year-old was being asked 8th grade questions appropriate for her ability, and the older kid is getting asked questions for their ability. So the program automatically adjusts for their level, so that's a fair race. So I was really impressed. And Sundog also, it's free, by the way.
It's free, and it's in Lincoln School.
Well, we paid for one classroom. Let me repeat. It's free for the math module and without any teacher reports. So any of you out there listening to this can go to sumdog.com, log on, and your kids can start playing the math questions. And that's half of it. I mean, and it's free. So I would highly recommend that your kids will love it, they'll have fun, and they'll grow in their math skills. They'll perform better. They'll become engineers.
and we have an example of Abigail who really excelled with Sundog.
I have a photo of Abigail using it.
And we'll show Abigail.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
your daughter, there's a great story with that.
Well, it's interesting. When you look at the reports that it gives you, it shows which kids are doing well, how many questions they've answered, what their accuracy is, and it shows their grade level. And here's a nice story. When we finished the year and I looked at the Sundog reports, it said that these 3rd, 4th graders were answering 5th, 6th grade questions. Common Core, 5th, 6th grade questions. 3 were at the 8th grade level.
Yeah.
3 were still at the 3rd grade level. But and Mrs. Masterson said the kids scored well on some exams that they had to do for the state, and she attributed it to Sundog. So I would like to get that in the entire district.
And that would cost
Well,
approximately
$30,000. If assuming there's 10,000 kids, for $30,000, we could get that to every child. And that would be something, that would be one of our, as a Rotarian, that would be one of our dreams, one of our
Right.
goals.
How does that sound to you?
Well, I've got a lot of questions about, that I know that the technology folks would
Yeah.
would want to ask. I certainly am enamored
Certainly.
with the notion of a $9 computer to help us solve some of those issues.
Well, those
But,
are refurbished, and
right.
they're not the same. It
Right.
introduces other problems.
Yeah.
But certainly, those types of resources and supplemental instructional materials are things that we don't have enough of. And,
Sure.
And that kind of assistance.
Well, this is
always
where
stuff we
the
need.
Rotary can really help, and other nonprofits
Right.
in the
Yeah,
area.
there may be a generous person watching today, or a foundation that might say, that's a good thing. If we can put this in the hands of every kid. And what we as Rotarians would do is we'd make sure that every kid got signed up. If the school gave us, or you got in and put the roster of all the kids and their teachers. Now the teacher goes in and they can see their children and how they're doing. But that's the kind of legwork we'd want to do. I don't want to add any burden to the teachers.
Certainly.
So we'd want to do the legwork. So all they had to do is,
Sure.
and Mrs. Masterson used it as a reward. She'd say, okay, finish your spelling test and you go play Sundog. It was fun. They loved doing it. And so that's the kind of excitement
Well, you're
that we
probably
generated.
looking for more members for your organization, right?
That's
Why
true.
don't you make an appeal today for volunteers?
That's true.
I'm sure they have to be qualified, but
Well,
if we don't ask,
if
you don't
have-
get.
If you're an ethical person and
sometimes.
your heart you want to serve, that's really the only qualification to be a Rotarian.
And because your motto is
Service above self.
service above self.
Yes, and I can't tell you how much it's enriched my life, my career, my wife's career, my daughter's career, without going into details of all changed
Sure.
because of it, and then of course the happiness it brings,
Yeah.
to be of service. It's a great joy.
Yeah, now, Al Magid's reading program.
If before we get to that, let me also say that we meet at the Blue Ribbon Diner on Tuesday morning for breakfast
Very early at
7:15.
7:15. That's a very
And I
early.
also wanted to mention two other programs that I recommend. Another one, that turns out there's a company here in Schenectady that is in the same business. They make software that they sell worldwide for
Right.
schools. And the first module, for example, teaches the 250 words, sight words, that are in most all of our language. If you take this 1 hour presentation and you break it out, 50-60% of the words coming out of our mouth are on this list of 240
Now,
words.
is this Sampson's Classroom?
It's called Sampson's
And it's
Classroom.
located in the Stockade here in Schenectady.
It's located in the Stockade and right on Union Street, and they are offering to Schenectady schools. They're offering their software for free for all 10,000 kids.
Oh.
So
Isn't that amazing?
That is.
Wow.
yeah, so that's kind of a no-brainer. And again, where Rotarians can help is to get everybody logged in, go to the classrooms and tell them, show them how it works, and make sure that
Well,
they know how to log in,
how
what their
important it
password
is to get this out to the public, because most people aren't aware of this, I'm sure.
Right. And once the kids
So-
have their login, then they can go to the library and use it anywhere.
Right.
And then there's, of course, Khan Academy, which I hope most people know about, but that's a great resource for even adults that want to learn anything right up through the high school level, that they're very nice, short. For example, Mrs. Masterson was teaching prime numbers, and she asked, do I have any comments? So I told her a little bit too, but still, am I really getting the point across? So then I went home and I looked at Khan Academy, and he did a much better job than I did.
Now, where is Khan?
And so
Where is
then
Khan
she showed,
Academy?
so I,
Is
it's
it just
out
on
of
online?
it's out of California.
It's out of California,
And
okay.
it started with a fellow who wanted to help his niece and nephew or something remotely with their homework. So that's
Okay.
so he started putting these little things on
Oh,
and
okay.
emailing it to them, kind of thing. Then, but it grew. He grew a library of lessons that he put out for free for everyone. Bill Gates liked it, and now he's got 20 plus employees, and it's really big.
And we'll have a slide on that'll
Yeah.
show what the
And here's a
content
nice
is
thing
about.
too. One of the things Mrs. Masterson asked, or when we're putting these computers in the classroom, one kid tugs at your sleeve. Can I have one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I asked Mrs. Masterson, what do you think? And again, we always worked under her direction, and she said, okay, let's do it. So our Rotary Club is getting 35 computers so that every kid in that class leaving and every kid coming in is going to get a computer. And on that, we're going to put Khan Academy offline. In other words, you don't have to have Wi-Fi. You don't have to subscribe. You don't have to subscribe to internet service to use Khan Academy. They're all going to have it. Now, where did I get the Khan Academy? It turns out another Rotarian in Providence College, he's trying to solve the problems worldwide, globally. So he's putting in little computer classrooms worldwide. His name is Stephen Mecca. If any of you have tablets or cell phones that you'd like to donate to him, I'll be sure there's a slide that has his email address so you can contact him. And so he is sending me a drive with Khan Academy on it, with 2,000 books, audio books and writing books. And these are the materials he's using in other countries, and we can use it right here. As an example of the Rotary connects people that want to serve.
Right.
And I emailed him the other day. I said, hey, these computers are ready now. Geez, I was over there yesterday looking at them. Well, I'm ready to pick them up. Where's the software? And he said, well, I'm in Colombia. We're putting in certain kind of toilet projects he's working on. His students have developed a sanitary toilet. He said there's 2.1 billion people on a planet that don't have a toilet. So that's what he's working on.
And
in
clean
his
water
spare time,
as well.
and he's got his students working on these projects. They're the ones who are designing the toilets. They're the ones who are pulling into the software that they need, and soon we'll have a copy, and all 35 of these kids will have this.
Great. I did want to mention, before we talk about some individuals that help, like Al Majid,
Yes.
I wanted to talk about the libraries and the importance of our Schenectady County Library and the branches, and we're going to have a new one that's going to be replacing the Duane branch. And they have programs. They've been having a summer program on. They just do a great job, and children need to read. We're making that clear, and we have a great gem here with our Schenectady County Library. And they do a great job with the Whitney Bookstore, where anyone can go in and purchase a book even for 50 cents. It could be used as a gift, but they'll have their own book for a nominal fee. So I did want to mention that.
I have another place where children can get books for free. We have, at First Methodist, they have a community breakfast every Sunday morning, full breakfast.
And this is located on
State Street.
Mhm.
And but the door that they go in is on Chapel Street.
Okay.
But anyhow, we got to thinking about kids needing to be exposed to books, and we had a lot of families come to this breakfast. And so we've set up a story hour for the kids, and the people with children get first place in line, and then their kids go to the story hour, and each kid gets a book to take home with them that they can pick out. And we've gotten donations of books from everywhere, and we kind of go through and make sure and then they get to take a book home. So this book thing is really booming in Schenectady.
Well, that's so wonderful.
It should be every kid in all of Schenectady eventually will have books.
Yes,
which is
and
good.
with you involved, Shirley, I'm sure it'll happen. I wanted to mention Al Majid. He has his own Reading is Fun program, and I don't know if he's a Rotarian, is he?
No, but he did come and speak to our club, and he's a great example of someone who, on his own initiative, started a program.
That's right.
And it's a tool that we as a community can use.
Right.
The community needs you. Schenectady needs you. And
Yeah,
we're
we
hoping
need-
that today we're going to give you some tools you can use and some resources you can use to help our kids succeed.
And Schenectady is looking for mentors,
Mhm.
and they're looking for teenagers to mentor as well as adults. And there is this proposal to have them be paid, and that would probably come from the Rotary fundraising to handle that, or maybe in conjunction with other organizations.
Right.
But that would be a great thing for Schenectady to expound on the mentoring program, because there is mentoring, but just to advance that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, we have so many kids that need mentoring.
Yeah.
I think every child needs, that significant adult in their lives, and we know we don't have nearly enough
Right. I'm
enough
interested.
mentors now. Great.
We talked about that.
Excellent.
I wanted to talk about the Lily Gant summer reading program too, quickly, if
It's just
possible.
another example of where a woman saw the need, and she has kids come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 5 o'clock for 1 hour, and they have volunteers, teenagers, adults, read to these children.
Is Lily Gant local?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and you know her,
I
Shirley?
know who she is, yes.
Okay. We need to, I'm glad we touched upon the mentoring program. That's so important. We need volunteers for that. I want to talk about a very important topic, and it's last but not least, and it's the parental involvement part in our schools and what's going on at Lincoln School. And Lee, I wanted you to talk about the family center that we talked about on the phone.
Sure. So we all know that parents are a kid's first educator, and them holding high expectations for their kids is really what sets the bar for their success. We also know that life presents obstacles that get in the way. And so at Lincoln, we've tried an innovative approach through the community school model, where we try to come together as a community to find ways to overcome those obstacles. And so my position at the school, I work directly with the parents to advocate for whatever it is really that they need. But first, we had to start with a welcoming environment. Some parents haven't had the best experience for themselves in school, and so coming to school and doing the things that we think of, like meeting with the teacher or reaching out to the teacher when they have a concern about their kid, may not necessarily happen if they don't feel welcome. So I established a family center that is the family space.
So this is your own program.
Well, we're following the guidelines of Karen Mapp's research, as well as the
Great.
Children's Aid Society, and Hal Lawson out of SUNY Albany.
Okay.
They all have a wealth of knowledge and experience doing this. We're fairly new in doing it. So we have looked to their guidance.
Sure.
And so we've tried to replicate, but make our own spin on it to fit our community and our need. So they have their own space that they can access. There are computers down there for them to use for parents have come in and applied for jobs. They've applied to Schenectady County Community College and done some work and submitted it online for that. They've searched for housing. I even had a grandparent who wrote her own book and put it up on Amazon and online publishers. She just completed that, so we worked together to try to facilitate that happening. There's also, I post jobs, things that are going on in the community, and then I'm just there as a resource for them if they have a particular challenge going on. I don't profess to know everything, but I can connect them with the resources in this community that are available, because there are a wealth of resources, and sometimes there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
So I try to be that link for them. So we have really tried to build on that, and our goal is to share in decision making in the school with the parents on their kids' education. So, we did a welcoming walkthrough where we engaged a bunch of families to come in and tell us, what do you really think of the environment, the people, what's going on there, what are the pros, what do you think we can improve on, make action plans, and then they're very much a part of helping to implement those.
Now, when did the program start?
2013-14 school year.
Okay.
There was a planning period before that, but we started our community school in
Now
2013.
you're funded through 2016 school year.
Portions of it, yes.
Portions of it.
So we had a grant, and then thankfully Mr. Spring saw the value in it and really supported us, and has committed district funding to some of our programs that are going on, so we can still implement the community school model while we explore, further grants to continue to
that's
expand.
wonderful. Now, is it in other schools besides Lincoln?
Well, Lincoln is the only school that's formally adopted the community schools model, but we've got other schools that are pursuing similar ends. So Hamilton Elementary is seeking to do very similar kinds of things. So the notion of increased parent engagement, dedicating folks to bring parents in and make them feel comfortable. The notion of trying to bring additional services for families into the school, trying to make the school kind of that notion of a single point of access. Bringing a health clinic into the school, so that that's where kids can get their, a lot of their medical needs met, and really kind of, thinking about that notion of how can we change our orientation about the role of the school in interaction with the parent, and generally, adopting the notion that, the parent is the one with the PhD in their child. We should be learning at their elbow about their child's needs. We should be honoring the parents' hopes and dreams about their child. Every parent wants the best for their child, and the school really does exist for the children and the families. And so what's the way in which we engage those families, bring them in, and make them a part of those governance conversations. Those principles exist in multiple schools, but Lincoln is the first school that has said, we want to formally make this a community school, and take the steps in order to ensure that we're abiding by all of those guidelines that the research plays out, with the community school model. So they're kind of leading that charge amongst other schools.
And Hamilton Hill is another struggling school in our area. It is.
So, lots of needs. There lots of transiency. Some difficult things to wrestle with, but really dedicated staff. One of the things that people don't realize about the Schenectady City School District, our staff are so highly qualified. We have got such dedicated folks. The National Board certification is a level of certificate for teaching that is above and beyond New York State certification. Right? This National Board certification came about because researchers at Stanford worried that state certificates were not that rigorous. And so they put in this other thing in place that the teachers can opt to try for, but it's very difficult to attain. It requires an awful lot of effort and very highly skilled teaching in order to achieve this level. Schenectady has more nationally board certified teachers than any other school district in New York State, with the exception of New York City. And for New York City to have more nationally board certified teachers than us, they have more teachers than we do students.
Sure. Well, it's nice to hear that we have that position. And how do you feel that the program has been going for you? Are you happy with the results?
It typically takes a community school about 5 to 6 years to reach, full swing maturity, where you're really, at the platform where you're jumping off into being able to expand things. So we're 2 years down the road. We've definitely seen some gains academically, as well as with attendance of our families. And I wanted to touch on one thing that Mr. Spring had mentioned about the way we interact with the families. Lincoln is really trying to be on the forefront of redefining what parental engagement is, moving from involvement to engagement, not just having activities where we ask the parents to come and however many show up, that's our
right,
parental
so it's
involvement.
more of a partnership, isn't it?
It is a partnership. And so this year we're going to be piloting a program out of Sacramento, California School District, which is the Parent Teacher Home Visit Project, where we go with the teachers to visit the children and the families in the home and just get to know them. It's a non-academic visit. And they just get to know them as people to set up that platform for that relationship so that there is open communication 2 ways. And they have seen a lot of positive results out of that. So we're trying to be on the forefront of that as well.
Wonderful. That sounds innovative.
And then to touch on yours, we're also doing a training series for parents on how to serve on shared decision-making groups. So we find that important as well.
Well, we presented a lot of information today, and I want to thank all of you for making this, I believe, a successful panel discussion, maybe the first of its kind, certainly for public access here. Our intent is that it gets a global viewership because of our SAC.TV, and we're connected to YouTube. It goes all over the world, so I'm sure we can help not just our own community, but people in other parts of the United States, in the world. So we are looking for volunteers, of course. We'll have some information on screen about donating your computers because they're donated by the Rotary, the Elfin Society, of course. And we just want to thank everyone again, and I believe everyone did a great job. So I hope you're all happy with what you did today. And I'm Janice Thompson. I'm the producer host of Schenectady Schools. It Takes a Village. Thank you.